Spin, known in French as Les Hommes de l'Ombre, or Shadow Men, has captured the imagination of a small but influential audience in the English-speaking world. It's the West Wing with added sex, says Mark Lawson in The Guardian, and is available on Channel 4's website as part of its Walter Presents series of hand-picked world dramas. Like the British satirical programme The Thick of It, the focus is not so much on politicians themselves as on the spin doctors working in the shadows. And like The Thick of It, with the demonically possessed Malcolm Tucker fighting a ruthless propaganda war, the spin doctors in Spin are credited with almost superhuman energy, insight, and manipulative guile. They are the real heroes, the nodes where all the lines of political force converge. The show is incredibly zeitgeisty in the current context, dominated by themes of terrorism, the rise of the far right, political alienation, and a ruthless centrist establishment. Spin begins with a national panic caused by the assassination of the French president, Pierre Despoir. But that killing contains within it a knot of political intrigue that unravels as the show progresses. When the president visits a factory where workers are being laid off, he is targeted in a suicide attack that leaves him fatally injured. And because the bomber, an employee at the plant, is an Arab, the authorities immediately assume that an Islamist group has carried out the attack. But even at this stage, the intricacies of France's racial politics are put to the forefront. When a minister, consulting with the chief of police, Inspector Pratt, describes the bomber as an Arab, the cop corrects him.
Bonjour, monsieur le Premier ministre.
Bonjour, alors qu'est-ce qu'on sait?
Pas grand-chose.
Si, la bombe humaine est un arabe.
Non.
Comment non?
C'est un fils de harki dont la mère est française.
C'est pas un arabe, ça?
Non, c'est un fils de harki dont la mère est française.
The term Harki derives from its use in the Algerian War of National Liberation from 1954 to 1962, referring to Algerian Muslims who fought on the side of the French colonial powers. Those empire loyalists were repatriated after the war was lost and became a distinct ethnic group, and also an embattled minority, despised in the country they were loyal to. However, Delouve's statement says it all. They think they're French, but a Harki? That's an Arab. While the president is still dying of his wounds, police launch a series of raids on immigrant households, and the machinery of government is put into overdrive sorting out his successor. Delouve calls the secret Constitutional Council to ensure that the president is declared unfit to rule. He announces,
En cas de malheur, il ne se présentera pas.
This sets up Delouve as vile and untrustworthy. Representing the right wing of the Socialist Party, he is the equivalent of the real-life Prime Minister and former Interior Minister, Manuel Valls. Simon Capita, the spin doctor, despises him and is out to destroy him. But it is unclear how much this is tangled up with his personal rivalry with Delouve's younger spin doctor, Ludovic Demeuse, a spiteful former protégé of Capita. Capita has the option of backing a candidate from the party's left, Alain Margerie, whom he agrees with and could even vote for. But he fears that this will just give Delouve a second life as he rallies the right wing behind him. As Capita puts it,
Pas moi. Je veux le dézinguer une fois pour toutes.
So, aiming for the centre, he immediately begins to poll test possible alternatives.
C'est les noms de quelques présidentielles des deux camps, je te soumets les mesures pour demain matin.
24 heures.
À 24 heures, je t'ai déjà demandé pire, tu peux le faire.
Tu défends plus de l'œuvre?
Pourquoi je défendrais de l'œuvre?
Je croyais que l'équipe s'était remise en formation de combat.
Quelle équipe?
Ludovic et toi?
Qu'est-ce que Ludovic a à voir là-dedans?
Capita settles on the Minister for Social Affairs, Anne Visage, who was present in the attack and who was still at hospital heaving with sobs over the president when Delouve made his move. She is upper class and centrist, and she shares Capita's motive to beat Delouve, and Capita thinks he can make a triumphant martyr out of her. But to beat Delouve, they will have to be incredibly resourceful, as he uses every underhand advantage, including the spooks, to beat them. There is more than a hint of Gallic patriarchy in all this, since even though Capita's struggle is to get a woman elected as head of state, he is the real hero, and part of the way his heroism is established is through the sequence of female characters, not plausible or rounded characters in the main, who are throwing themselves at him when not weeping on his shoulder. Even the most senior civil servant, the most powerful woman in France, Gabrielle Takishiev, can't resist Capita when he tells her,
Tu es belle, Camille, lorsque tes yeux s'animent.
Ironically, the candidate of the left, Alain Margerie, becomes president largely thanks to the war of attrition between Capita and Desmauves. By directing all their fire at one another, they have mutually exhausted their support and given Margerie the initiative. He quickly forms an alliance with the centre of the party, personified by Visage, and excludes Desmauves and the right. This seems like a departure from the programme's putative realism, given the trends in the French Socialist Party. And in that respect, it is akin to the liberal fantasy, The West Wing. But it gives the series a chance to explore the difficulties that would besiege a left-wing executive. And as Margerie will discover, he can't cope without Capita. On top of that, Margerie has to deal with an emerging scandal as Capita's now ex-wife discovers that the Interior Minister, Benoit Hussin, has been involved in a shady deal with corruption firms to build a football stadium in his hometown.
L'appel d'offres pour le stade a noté de la main de Husson, notre ministre de l'Intérieur, en personne.
Avec toutes les précisions pour niquer les concurrents.
Ah, c'est beau ça!
On va se le faire.
Un stade de 20 000 personnes à 60 millions d'euros. Combien il a pu toucher?
Ça, on sait pas.
Il a pu privilégier une entreprise sans forcément toucher de l'argent.
Dans le monde de oui, mais dans la vraie vie, il y a toujours du fric à la clé.
This deliberately references the fate that befell Jérôme Cahuzac, Hollande's Minister of the Economy, when he was nailed for tax avoidance by Mediapart in 2012, as The Guardian reported. However, unlike Cahuzac, whose motives were pecuniary, Hussin's corruption is represented as relatively minor and understandable. He favoured a construction company that would give locals more work, without taking any money himself. Predictably enough, as Capita returns, so does his rival Desmauves, seeking to forge an alliance with the centrist Hussin and persuade the latter to incriminate both himself and the president.
Il faut que Benoît Husson avoue que Margerie a touché de l'argent personnellement pour sa campagne. La Palissy nous suivra.
Benoît faudra jamais faire ça. Puis c'est pas forcément vrai.
Mais il suffit que ça ait l'air vrai. Si votre mari veut encore un avenir politique, il faut qu'il collabore avec la droite. Il faut qu'il nous aide à faire tomber ce gouvernement.
With Capita's help, Margerie weathers the offensive, but it all begins to take a toll on his health and he slips into a coma. And to avoid letting Desmauves sense weakness, the leadership team decides to lie to everyone. This brings out Capita's unlikely ethics. He knows the truth and, as he explains,
Écoutez, Gabriel, le président est dans le coma. Il y a suspicion d'AVC. Vous parlez de fatigue et de malaise, ça s'appelle un mensonge d'État.
Je gagne du temps.
Si le président est dans l'incapacité de gouverner...
Si.
Si le président est dans l'incapacité de gouverner, je me tairai pas.
Pour l'instant, il ne s'agit que de si. Vous ne savez rien, alors vous vous taisez comme tout le monde.
he seems to have forgotten that his job is to lie and manipulate people. But then even Margerie's famous incorruptibility leaves him deciding, in the end, to escape his scandals to kill two men who are blackmailing the government. Addressing a security meeting, he puts it as a matter of conscience. I want everyone to let their conscience decide. We're talking about the elimination of two men. Needless to say, their conscience said it's okay. Nonetheless, this phase of the programme, beginning with Series 2, is in some ways more politically interesting than the previous phase. It is driven far less by slick action and far more by the chicanery and shifting alliances of factional struggle within the socialist leadership, as well as by the compromises of power. Beyond the concern with Islamophobic and securitarian panic, the explicit politics of spin are kept deliberately bland. The character of Desmauves is clearly despicable and says a lot about what the programme's writers think of Socialist Party right-wingers. On the other hand, Visage speaks warmly and nebulously about social justice and solidarity between the generations, while Margerie is avowedly left-wing and incorruptible. But all of that is secondary to the action-driven story about heroic spin doctors and their allies. And we are plainly invited to admire Capita. If we're supposed to like these characters, it is because they are anti-heroes. But when Capita's wife confronts him over the death of a witness and says, he was going to reveal what a shit show politics is, your type of politics, you're responsible, the show almost makes her out to be an hysterical shrew compared to Simone's calm, scrupulous reason. Likewise, when Visage complains about the corruption of her allies,
j'ai axé mon programme sur la transparence, le refus des compromis, et là, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Des combines, des saloperies?
she is represented as a naive idealist lost in a big boy's world. French politics may be corrupt and Capita may play its games. He is ruthless, unaccountable, operating in secrecy. But precisely for that reason, he is represented as the only type of person adequate to fight for the good. And insofar as the program has any allegiance, it may be to the hopes that the Hollande presidency once represented. The actor who plays Simon Capita, Bruno Wolkovich, has said, "I still believe in François Hollande." He tells the Huffington Post, "I think he's good, clever, he knows a lot about politics, and he doesn't show it. Everyone's been making fun of him, and I love to be on the side of the underdog." He is expressing his own opinion here, but it may also be the politics of spin. Spin is an interesting program, however, less because of its express allegiances than because of what it is saying about the French state. In a way, the program stresses how compromised any left-of-centre politician has to become in order to win in this terrain, how much they need to delegate the dirty work to their Machiavellian operators and thugs, and how much they come to resemble their unscrupulous opponents.